And that was really the jumping off point for us of the whole thing. And because we just said, why is it that the laws written to govern how you can raise money for a startup in 2010 were written back in the 1930s before most people had a landline telephone in their house, which is nuts.
Hello, I'm Daniel Weinmann, and this is Beyond Technical, the Nontechnical Founders podcast. You see, in order to bring my startups to life, I had to go from non-technical to CTO. I failed again and again and again until I finally succeeded a few times. Now I think it's time to share some of these experiences with you, together with a bunch of amazing people I met along the way. And for our first episode ever, I had the great pleasure of talking to my longtime friend, Jason Best. Jason is the co-founder of Vectr Fintech Partners and also the co-author of the crowdfunding investing framework behind the Jobs Act. In other words, if you ever came across equity crowdfunding, it's because Jason, his partners, and a bunch of great people made it into law in the United States. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Let's check it out. Jason, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm very excited to have this chat with you. How are you doing, man?
I am good. I am healthy and moving forward. So it's a good thing these days. I'm excited to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me to have a chat with you today.
Yeah, love it, man. Love it. You and I go way back, and it's always a pleasure.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to catch up.
Great to catch up with you.
Yeah, man. I think it's a great starting point to this conversation. We've met when you, Woody, and your third co-founder, whom I forgot the name. What's his name? Zach. You, Woody, and Zach were working like nonstop to make equity crowdfunding happen in the United States. And you made it. Can you tell folks a bit about this story and just so we can start by where we've met?
Sure. We met because basically the story begins in an odd place. It begins at a friend's wedding in August of 2010. And Woody and I, these are friends of ours. Woody and I have been friends since graduate school, which is a long time ago. And so we were at a friend's wedding, and we were talking about the lack of access to capital. You know, after a few drinks at a wedding, people talk about lots of crazy things. And we had both been really lucky, and we had both been able to build companies, raise money from VCs, angel investors, private equity groups, build businesses. But that's not the story for most people. Most people don't have access to that, and we only had access to that because we got lucky. Because I'm from a small town in Louisiana, a very rural state in the south of the United States. 25,000 people. There's no VCs there.
Yeah.
And so I understand what not having access to capital is like. And so we said, look, if you can give away money on Kickstarter, this is back in 2010, if you can lend money to entrepreneurs in the developing world through Kiva, why can't people in the US invest in businesses they use every day or in entrepreneurs they believe in? And that was really the jumping off point for us of the whole thing. And because we just said, why is it that the laws written to govern how you can raise money for a startup in 2010 were written back in the 1930s before most people had a landline telephone in their house, which is nuts. So, and it was that way because it had always been that way. We had calls with probably a half a dozen attorneys, securities attorneys, who very patiently explained to us that was not going to change. From big firms and small firms, it's just like, this is not changing. This just do something else. This is crazy. We're not very smart. We decided we're more stubborn than smart. So we just decided, let's give it a try. So sitting at my dining room table, we had my screen up, and there were one was a web page that showed the 1933 and 1934 acts of the securities laws that regulated the United States. The other was a blank Word document. And we said, if we're going to take this and modernize it, what does it look like? And so we created a 10-point framework we called the Startup Exemption Framework, which said, here's how we're going to raise money in the age of Facebook and Twitter in a way that protects investors, provides transparency, the way that enables companies to do the process is easy enough for startups to use, and that it enables this new ecosystem of fundraising to grow. So, we have no connections in Washington, D.C. we started going around. We met a woman there named Karen Kerrigan, who was instrumental in the passage of the Jobs Act because she was the head of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council in DC, which is the closest thing to entrepreneurs have for a lobbyist in Washington, DC. She's amazing. And so, we told her what we wanted to do. And she said, well, first we went to the SEC itself. And we went to the director of small business for the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States. And we sat before him and he listened very patiently and he patted us on the heads and like school children and said, this is a really nice idea, but we don't do this. Like, we're not going to change these laws because that's not in our purview. You have to, the Congress and the president have to make a new law. And then we will then regulate the new law, but we don't make this big of a change. And the big change really was allowing regular investors, unaccredited, non-super rich people, the ability to invest in private companies. That was the big change. To a regulator, that at the time was like saying the earth was flat. It was just a basic tenet of the world. So, long story short, over the course of 460 days, we spent a lot of time in DC, Washington, D.C., walking the halls of Congress, talking to different people. We, testified in front of House and Senate committees 5 times. We worked very closely with the Obama White House. Later, if we have time, I'll tell you the funny story about how that started. The White House collaboration started.
I would love to.
The short version is we've been lobbying. We had our first testimony in the House. We've been talking to lots of people in D.C. And, people were curious. They were willing to listen, but, it was sort of like, big change, seems kind of hard. How do we know it's not going to be full of fraud and full of theft? And so, we're not going to put our reputation on the line to try something new because nobody in DC gets a promotion for doing something new. And so anyway, one day, Woody and I got an email in our inbox and we read the email and the address of the email was whitehouse.gov. And there was a gentleman who was the head of the Science and Technology Policy Office in White House. So immediately we assumed our friends were playing a joke on us. And someone had created this fake email to send to us to get us excited because all of our friends thought we were crazy. Our parents also thought we were crazy for doing this. And so, but it turned out there was like a real guy and a real phone number. And he said, I want to talk to you guys about this. And that's really how we started working with the Obama White House on this policy as well, because he had heard our initial testimony and wanted to learn more.
That's wonderful.
And so anyway, over the course of that 460 days, we got it done. A lot of lessons learned. We ended up being invited to the White House to sit in the Rose Garden and watch the President Obama sign the Jobs Act into law in April of 2012. And then a whole new chapter of life began after that.
That's an incredible story, especially the part where everybody were saying you were crazy and you wouldn't get there. I laughed when you talked to several attorneys because that was our experience here in Brazil, starting the regular crowdfunding, not even equity stuff, because equity took us much longer to get there.
Yeah.
But we would talk to multiple attorneys, the Central Bank of Brazil, and they would say, there's no way this could be done because of a law that was written in the 70s that prevented basically what people called collective savings. And the way crowdfunding works, Kickstarter-like crowdfunding works, from the perspective of our law, looks like collective savings and wouldn't work.
Yep.
Differently, in our case, we decided to just ignore the law instead of changing it and see what happens. And we're now 10 years since we did it, and literally no one questioned the model.
The SEC in the US takes a slightly different view of innovation.
Yeah. No, I think our equivalent to the SEC is very strict here in Brazil also.
Is that right?
That's why it took us, 5 more years or even more after the US had approved equity crowdfunding to approve here, and still very early in our scenario.
It's still early here too. We only recently got the regulation change that goes into effect in March of this year, so March 15th of 2021, to increase the level to 5 million from 1 million. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, tell us more about this, because this is a huge change, right?
When we first changed the rules, our first proposal was $1 million cap from regular investors, because we had to make the level enough to raise money, but not so much that the Congress or the SEC was terrified of pyramid schemes and other sorts of collective, sort of fundraising. The question I got asked 100 times was, what happens when my grandmother loses her life savings?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we put in place, limits on how much individuals can invest and how much you can invest in total. Could be raised in total per raise. $1 million is a lot of money to a lot of businesses, regular businesses across the world. But to enable higher growth businesses to raise, we needed to increase the cap to give them more headroom, more opportunity.
Sorry, just to make very clear, when we're talking about the 1 million cap, we are at the present moment. This is lower than a seed round, the average seed round.
Yes.
In Silicon Valley, right? So we're still not
seed round is 3 to 5 million.
Variable. Yeah.
Yeah, seed round is 3 to 5 million. And so now, we passed the law in 2012. It took until 2016 before the SEC allowed regulation crowdfunding to begin, because they finalized all the regulations. So you could tell they weren't very excited. Yeah. Woody and I have been collecting all of the data on every crowdfunding raise since initialization. So we have all the data. And so with 4 years of data, 4.5 years of data now, we've been going back to the SEC and providing them with this data on a quarterly and annual basis. There's been no fraud in 4.5 years. There's been $700 million raised from over 700,000 people. There have been crowdfunding raises in over 1,100 cities across the United States. There are now hundreds of companies who have raised a second round, gone back. They raised the first round successfully, went back and raised a second round of crowdfunding as well. And people who have raised crowdfunding rounds that have now raised VC money afterwards. Yeah. And so all of these things that everybody said wouldn't happen or couldn't happen have happened. And so fortunately, this regulation change occurred at the end of last year. Now we're going to effect in the middle of March. And it should enable anybody to raise a Silicon Valley seed round anywhere in the United States.
That's a very important change. How do you think this will affect the creation of early stage startups and the business of early stage venture capitalists, which is your business also, right?
Yeah. So I'm now one of the other things that I do is a Fintech venture capitalist. We invest globally, early stage, seed, and Series A. And so I think it's good for the ecosystem. One of the things, COVID has been a horrible thing for the world. One of the things that one of the silver linings to the crisis has been that it has taught the world that remote work works. Number two, and what that has enabled is people to build companies anywhere in the world they want. And because people left the Bay Area and Silicon Valley and San Francisco to go back home and live with their parents or live in a cheaper place or just whatever, right? They wanted to get out of cities and go to the country. And then they built something, and now they've been able to interest investors in it, even if they're in, on a mountainside or in a small town or in a different country. So slowly, the investors are becoming more comfortable at investing in things which are not all in Palo Alto or San Francisco. And you're seeing more investors in more places be willing to look at deals. So this change in the regulation, coupled with the societal changes we've had, is incredible for innovation. It's incredible for entrepreneurship and for investing. There are always people who are like, there's too many companies, not enough, and too many things to look at. Investors complain about everything always. And so, but the point is, you want to have, we should encourage innovation, job creation, and entrepreneurship everywhere, because there are smart people everywhere in the world. And one of the incredible opportunities I've had as a result of, after the Jobs Act, is having worked in 45 countries around the world. So I've met a lot of people, and I'm working on fintech policy and regulation, and there are incredibly brilliant people everywhere in the world, and all they need is access to capital and opportunity. And so that's what this does.
Yeah, and it's we cannot underestimate it. There probably is a change coming to the ecosystem with this update on the regulation that's just around the corner now. Next month, we're gonna start seeing the results. What were the changes if they actually happened on the individual investment level?
So the changes would be the two major things are it sort of slightly broadened the opportunity for people to invest up to 10% of their income or net worth. So there was just some small language changes just to allow people to invest a maximum of $10,000 per opportunity. So it sort of makes sure no one's going to put all their money on a cryptocurrency. It's a very safe kind of measured way to think about that. Look, early stage investing is high risk, and you can certainly lose all your money. But I would suggest that it's no more risky than when people go to their Schwab or Robinhood account and start investing in futures and options and currencies, which is, in my view, far more dangerous.
Yeah, just like we're seeing now with all this crazy thing.
And so the other change that is a big deal is the ability to crowdfund a fund. So you use a special purpose vehicle, an SPV, to enable you to almost have your own kind of mini fund, which at first regulators in 2010 were against. We explained that we thought it was a diversification tool so that someone could, if you could raise $1 million and put that money into 10 companies, $100,000 into each company, that seems like a good diversification strategy to me.
Yes.
But it was just, it was just too much change at the same time. But fortunately, after a lot of years of lobbying, we kind of got that change too. So those are the two other, there's a few other sort of technical changes, but those are the most important ones for folks to know.
Yeah, wonderful. And you as an investor, do you see your strategies or behaviors changing with this law? In other words, are you gonna invest more in crowdfunded deals, or just when people start raising more their seed round via crowdfunding, you're gonna join more on the Series A? Do you anticipate any change like that, or are you just looking to see what the actual change will be?
I don't have any specific views yet on where the change is going to happen, other than to say, there's going to be, number one, there'll be more opportunities for me to look at, because there'll be more companies at the pre-seed level that get enough funding to build an MVP, to get 10 customers, to get a little bit of validation and have something to show, to get beyond the idea stage. Number two, I think this is a huge benefit for non-technical founders, because it will enable you to formalize a friends and family round in a way that enables you to get a little bit of money, bring on a full stack developer to help you kind of scratch something together, and so that a VC or an angel or a syndicate can look at it and decide if it's something that makes sense for them. Because at the end of the day, I mean, one of the big lessons is, it's all about action. And, you can think about things for a long time. You can plan and hope and dream, but it's just, you got to start. You got to start you have to start wherever you can start on whatever you can start on. And that's the only thing, that's the only way to get anything done. And that's one of the biggest challenges sometimes for non-technical founders like me, like myself, is how do I start if I'm not technical? What can I do? Those kinds of things. So it's just, I think it just opens up more opportunities.
Yeah, and definitely, I love that we're transitioning to this area. Definitely, the biggest limitation for non-technical founders is sometimes knowing that they cannot afford good technical talent, and that's why they get into the competition for technical co-founders, because they cannot pay anybody to build, not anybody, but anybody that's highly qualified or qualified enough for the job. So they start looking for technical founders and sometimes spend months and months on end testing someone, and then this person starts the project but then gets a job offer in a bigger startup or big company, and they just leave you empty-handed because you didn't launch. Part of it is, of course, knowing how to be lean, how to do the smallest MVP you can, just so you can leverage the little technical help you have while you have it, because sometimes technical founders just will move on to other things. But a huge part of this is thinking you cannot afford paid technical people. With these updates on the crowdfunding laws, everything will seem like non-technical founders will have a bigger incentive to raise a crowdfunded round, right?
I think so. And I think the other thing that we see a lot with non-technical co-founders that come to us is they have done the research, they've got a good story and a good pitch, and logically it makes sense, and there's a large available market, and all those kind of things are there. What they want is the perfect $3 million seed round.
Yeah.
So that everybody gets paid, everybody has a comfortable life, snacks in the lobby, and the whole thing, right? And I just again go back to start something. And so if you can raise $50,000, raise $50,000, and that's enough to pay a full stack developer to get something put together. And also, best if you're willing to give that full stack developer some equity as a part of that package.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. I mean, you've raised a really good point. It's like I've seen founders spend a long time co-founder dating,
yes,
and looking around and finding the perfect technical co-founder. And what I've seen, sometimes it works, give it a shot, but it's like most of the time what you need is a good full stack developer who's willing, who is like a few types of people to look for. A person, a woman or a man who had been in a startup, it's been acquired by somebody big, doesn't like the big company, who's looking to get out and do something new. Number two, startup, somebody who was at a startup that started failed. Good talent, just started failed. Number three, someone who the one area that I've seen be problematic sometimes is someone who may be a full stack developer, but they've only been at a big company.
100%.
And they've never experienced life in the real world. And so I would be cautious about people, because a number of times I've seen someone who've only been at Goldman, only been at JP Morgan, only been at whatever. And then you put them into the real world and they're like, wait, where's my secretary and, my assistant and everything else? And so having somebody who'd been the CTO of Twitter in the last, in 2020 is not valuable to you.
Unless, of course, it's
as an advisor or an investor.
As an advisor, exactly.
But you need someone who's like been coding a lot.
And we hire at Season, we hire developers that hadn't been working with startups, and the culture of shock is huge when that happens, because, or not only developers, sometimes our technical leadership and folks that are very experienced. Some even worked at startups, but not as early stage as we do. And even then, the speed, not the actual speed in terms of how much you deliver, but the speed on which you adapt, and how lean are you willing to get is it's something I agree 100%. When you have someone on your team that's been for a long time, hopefully working on early stage stuff, they will cut corners, but not the ones you shouldn't cut. They will have this experience, right?
What stage for you, when you're looking at what early stage is, where that line you draw between early stage and growth stage, where those technical people need to have that experience? Is it between A and B? Is it between seed and A?
I am so used to be working before Series A that I don't even know very much about the world after Series A.
Yep.
My startups were all bootstrapped, so I don't have this experience. But definitely, I currently have a framework that I use to try to contribute to other non-technical founders' journeys. That is, if you didn't find product market fit yet, I personally wouldn't even involve developers. I would try to go with no-code tools or with service. That's my favorite, actually. I start by doing concierge stuff, creating everything well-positioned, so in the future we can become a product. But at first, do literally paid service, probably higher end than you're gonna be able to charge when you when you have an actual product. But that's my strategy is to literally start with the business and then build tech, or with the business plus no code solutions, which today are like incredible, until you find market fit. And my definition of market fit for this case is when you have more demand than you can fulfill.
I think that's a great framework, because doing it, like people always say, like, do non-scalable things until they break.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's your framework makes a ton of sense in that model, because it's what you can do. You'll learn, and also you learn what the customer will do and what the customer will pay for and how the customer thinks. It always annoys me when you meet with non-technical founders who've not sat with, a bunch of customers and really know what's going on, or haven't really tried to sell something before. Again, it's like waiting for perfection that's not a good sign of an entrepreneur, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I've been asked many times, what's the first step for a non-technical founder? And the answer is always sell something to someone. Like, there's no other answer I'm going to give. So I agree 100% with you. One corollary of this framework is that I think you shouldn't date technical co-founders before you find product market fit. Unless, of course, you already have a network, you already know the people, and it's obvious to you that you're going to find someone and you're going to join together and start together and etc. If you don't know where to start, you don't know where to look, or if you've been looking and having a hard time, it's much better to either do 100% business development or hire someone to do no code. You don't even need to learn no code yourself, because then you can focus on business development. But it's much cheaper to hire someone to do no code than it is to build actual code. But that's not even the biggest point. The biggest point is on maintenance. It's much, much cheaper to maintain no code solutions until, of course, you reach that milestone of having more demand than you can fulfill. And then you can think about optimizing your internal capacity through custom-built technology. That's the way I try to think. It's unfortunately, it's not very common for people to think like that. People love to start with the product, right?
Yeah, I mean, for whoever's watching this, let me just say that's the lesson for today, is what he just said, because I'll say my own personal experience. When one of the companies that we started, we first thought we needed this, and this was also a long time ago, before there were no code tools. Everything had to be highly technical to build, and everything. People still bought servers and put them in places called rack space, and it's crazy. It's like prehistoric times. But that opportunity to do things with just whatever you can do without having to code stuff is so important, because what we did, number one, our first step was hire people that promised super customizable, super bespoke, incredibly intricate things that, to our, at that time, very untechnical minds, because it was a long time ago, sounded perfect. And then we got something that we could not maintain, and we could not afford to maintain with them. The next mistake that we made was the next thing was say, okay, now what we need to do is go and spend money on a really expensive, big brand that can do lots of stuff for us, because the brand will fix everything and make people want to come to us because they're a global brand. No one cares.
Yeah,
what people want is software that's easy to use and works. That's all they care about. And so the approach that you're outlining, you take control of your own destiny, right? You understand the workflow and the process and the product and the customer adoption cycle in a way you could never understand in the other two ways I described before, which will serve you well in investor conversations. Because here's the thing, and I just had this conversation yesterday with a team. It's a business that is offering something to small businesses that I think is actually very valuable for small businesses. But the pitch, and they have some technical ability to deliver it, and they've already got a product that works, and they're continuing to build it out. But in the pitch, it's like one of these pitches, you've probably experienced this too, Daniel, where it's like there's something really awesome there, but you can't quite put your hands on it. You can't quite grab a hold of it, right? And it's like, and you don't feel like the founder understands what that actual clear, compelling value prop, like the one sentence value prop is. And it was really frustrating. And I just told him, I was like, look, guys, you need to come back and like think about this. Because I was like, I can't go to my investors and say this is a good idea until I can articulate to them why this is this amazing thing. And it comes down to this very simple thing, how we think about product market fit and how we think about, because big market is great. And you can prove a big market for pretty much anything. And that's fine. The big market's great. There are big markets for lots of things. And so if I'll explain my bias here, because what we invest primarily in is B2B and B2B2C opportunities. We do very little on direct-to-consumer investing. And so in those spaces, the only two reasons a business ever buys anything is number one, to stop current pain they're experiencing in the business, or number two, to prevent future pain.
Yeah.
That's it. Nothing else. Nothing else. Because you can have a really cool thing and they're not going to buy it. People will, it's like, and so what these guys had done in their pitch was articulate some cool things that were interesting and not sufficient.
Yeah. And one thing that I've experienced a lot, and I think by my first startup experiences were with very, very talented technical co-founders. And the whole startup development was driven by the product, just like I was suggesting us not to do. And one thing that I noticed is that when people do not love the business development part, like, man, I really love finding the unique value proposition and the right positioning and etc. It's hard for them to even grasp what you were trying to convey. Not because they don't know. They read the books. They know they should do their canvas or whatever. And the greatest technical co-founders I've met, they love product, but they love business more. And not in the sense of making money necessarily, like providing value, finding that something that fits with someone and all this design that's not on the product. Do you think these founders you were referring to right now, are they the type of people that prefer looking at the product than at this more subjective part? Or is it just that they need to work more on it?
That's a really interesting question. So they're very smart. They're both very smart. They both have had successes in their past. They both are business people. And I mean, and like at first glance, the deck was well constructed, but it was that like, how are you going to make me stop whatever it is I'm doing, pull out my credit card and do something different and incur the psychological pain of explaining to my colleagues or my boss or my board or whoever that we're going to do something different, which is we're going to have some degree of short-term pain in order to get longer-term gain. And until you can help people, until you give people that magic moment, like, because that was the thing we talked about yesterday, was like, you have to shrink the amount of time someone gets to get to that first magic moment with your product. Because then it's like, oh, okay, this is actually was worth whatever I had to do to get there. And now I'll do it again because it's going to be, less and less pain. But, and the pain, and just to make it really clear for people, pain in the business sense is my costs are too high. My revenue is too small. My profit margin is too small. My staff is too large. My staff is too small. That's what pain means in the business sense. It's just like very tangible, real world stuff. Because if you can't solve a problem, no one's going to buy your thing.
And just to add to this, an example to this, I had a business where I couldn't find the very specific pains, and all of the pains I was solving were more subjective. Like, you need more friends, you need more community, you need to feel better with yourself. I'm talking about my tango dancing school I had, and when I think we did a pretty good job on the marketing end, but I couldn't find the pain that was like, okay, not necessarily monetary, but more on the hard end, less on the soft end. It took much more effort in terms of marketing and finding people. We could generate the magical moments and all, but to attract people to the first experience, it was really hard because you needed to have a huge megaphone and find I don't know, a needle on the haystack and the ones that were already connected with this more subtle message. So, and for B2B, in your case, it's even stronger because you need to sell internally anytime you buy something on a B2B world, right?
Yeah. And there's 100 points of no. And you have to think about like, if someone does say yes to this, are there going to be people who are negatively impacted? Like one example, real world example, in insurance tech, which we invest in also. You bring in a new piece of insurance tech that maybe helps to decide what the rates of the insurance policy should be faster and easier. Then some of the people who today do it manually are worried they're going to lose their jobs. And so this is very kind of real world stuff. I will say that I thought your social media around your tango school was actually great. I remember seeing all those posts on Facebook and other things, and it's like really well done stuff. For me, it was just like, well, obviously I'm not in Brazil, but it's like you guys did it really, really well. And it's like, imagine, it was hard for me to imagine I could ever get to that level.
Yeah, we did.
I could ever do it that well.
We did it well, but
I couldn't imagine myself being able to dance that well. So it's like you say, like getting to that point of like trying it the first time, being willing to risk and try it that first time.
Exactly that. And we were able to create those moments. It just, we needed to literally 100% of what we invested to generate this moment was exactly what we made in the first moment. So it was, we would just break even in this huge social media investment. And we rode the wave of Facebook pre-2016, which actually enable small business to do marketing there. And it worked. But suddenly it stopped working, and we couldn't make this sustainable because we would invest like, I don't know, 2,000 in ads, and we would before we would have 2,000 in revenue, and then the balance changed, and we actually decided to close the business because of this. But if we had the opportunity not to need this big megaphone and actually target more because we had clearer pain points, just like you said, I think we might have had a better chance.
Yeah. Wow.
One interesting question, because I meet a lot of B2B non-technical founders, and my bias is always towards service. And I think on the B2B world, it's easier to start with service because you still need to have to go to all the points of no you mentioned, if you're selling a service or if you're selling a product, right? Do you think I'm wrong here, or is it a good strategy to start by providing premium service and then turning into a product?
I think it's a great strategy because if there's something you can do manually or with a little bit of light automation. So an example is the founders I was talking about just now. They were able to take some basic functionality in Google Sheets, create a small plugin with very low code that enables someone to get the magic moment in a few minutes. And so it's exactly what you were talking about. So it's like, there's still, like at the first stages, there was still some manual work for them to do because they said, like, let us take this on and do it for you and then hand it back to the customer who liked it, right? Now they've got a little bit more code written that allows most of it to be done by their software and the plugin. And then they're now going to raise a little bit of money to be able to make it a fully automated solution. So they're following your methodology. And it's like, because you can usually find a handful of people who are experiencing that pain significantly and who are willing to, either pay you a little bit of money or give you a little bit of their time to try to alleviate the pain.
Yeah. And one of the fears people have when I talk to them is that either for clients or when they're selling to investors, they think without having a product, people won't buy or won't invest. So I'm going to ask you as an early stage investor, would you invest in a company that has like this kind of low code or no code product plus a lot of manual service, but they do have revenue and were able to close deals, etc.? Or do you expect some level of product before investing?
And so the answer is it would depend on the specifics of the deal. But broadly speaking, what I would say is if someone came to me and they here's this, let's say it's 75% manual and 25% automation today. We've made $100,000 in revenue doing it this way. You can clearly articulate the customer journey and the customer pain point and how you're solving the pain. And you have a clear technical roadmap of how you're going to go from manual to fully automated in a reasonable period of time that's measured in, weeks or months, not years. And that there's you can see the demand for that service over time, then sure, that would make sense to me. That would make sense to me. But, so it doesn't have to be fully automated. I mean, do I want it to be fully automated over time? Yes. Because it needs to be scalable for a venture outcome. Because as a VC, most of the money that I invest is somebody else's money. They give me their money to give them a big return and over the course of 7 to 10 years. And so I'm a fiduciary. I have to act in their financial interests. And so I have to invest in businesses that I believe have very fast growth potential. But the ability for a founder to deeply understand the customer journey and the customer pain at the beginning of the process enables them to solve that pain in a unique way. It's someone else. I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, but I'm taking his phrase. It's called an earned secret, right? It's like you as the founder have an earned secret, and you are Mike Maples, the famous Mike Maples. That's his phrase. Of Floodgate Investments, VC in Silicon Valley. And you take that earned secret that you as a founder know because you understand the journey. And then you ride a series of macro inflections in the market that enable you to create a high growth business. So where you're describing though is part of that journey. It's because it has to start somewhere. And so founders today are incredibly fortunate to have access to low code, no code opportunities, as well as, more and more people who are able to code.
One final question. I don't know why, but I think people will usually think as when you're an investor and you have a VC fund, they don't think of a VC fund as a regular company, or at least that's the mindset I have. But I would love to hear your perspective on do VC founders, people that create funds, are you afraid to fail, just as if you were creating a startup? Are there challenges that people do not anticipate? And what's your take of being an entrepreneur that created a fund instead of a product or a startup?
Yeah, I mean the two paths to being a VC, generally speaking, are one, someone who's come out of a larger fund, who's been an investor their whole lives. So they left Stanford and got a job at a big fund in Silicon Valley, and then they decide they want to start their own fund, which is not my journey. Or people who are entrepreneurs who have a little bit of traction and success in their lives and decide that they wanted to help other entrepreneurs and to build a business that way. Having raised money for both a fund and raised money for companies, in my view, raising money for a fund is more difficult because when you're a founder, you can, set the product or the SaaS service on the desk, and it's very concrete. Even a SaaS product is concrete in that way because there's a thing, and you're selling the thing, and people are buying the thing, and there's a transaction, and it typically happens in a fairly short period of time, so you can gauge success. With a fund, all you have to sell is your brain and your network and your work ethic. That's what you're selling. And so the main jobs that a VC has to prove they can do is, number one, see as many deals as possible from deal flow sources. Number two, pick the right deals that are going to succeed big. And number three, help the companies you've picked to actually succeed. Do good work with those companies so you actually can add value and not just wait for a big check to show up one day. I'll just, being really candid, it's like, it is, in a way, and there are some days it's really terrifying because when you're a founder of a business, you have 100% control of that business. And you know that everything you're doing for that business will either succeed or fail because of your efforts and your team's efforts, right? But it's 100% in your control. As a minority investor, as an investor who owns, between 5 and 10% of your business, I'm in the back seat of the car. I'm along for the ride. I've given you money, and I now have told people who gave me money that these are the right people to invest in, and I've got to do all I can do to help. But at the end of the day, I don't get to make the decision. Like, I'm sitting at the board meeting and the CEO is telling me I'm going to do X and Y. And I say to her, I could have my opinion, that I can tell her that's a great idea or a bad idea. At the end of the day, I leave and she goes and does what she wants to do. I have no control over that outside of a few, drastic measures. And so, and the other thing about this, I love what I do. I love this job. Amazing. I absolutely am in love with what I do, and I want to do it for the rest of my professional life. And it's incredibly rewarding, but it's there's a lot of sleepless nights because you're trying to figure out how to add value, how to find more investors for the fund, how to deliver value back to your investors, how to deliver value to the ecosystem, how to deliver value to the founders you invest in. It's like everything in life. It's actually because, like energy, the energy in the universe, right? Like I think there's more karma and energy attached to venture capital, investors.
Yeah.
Just because so much of what this is about the energy you put out and the energy you take into these situations. And about building your reputation, building the ecosystem's trust in you and how you approach things. So there's a lot of esoteric things that you can't control, and you have to just sort of focus on things you can control. Long answer to a short question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it was a beautiful answer, man. I love when we are able to look at all kinds of entrepreneurs and see that there is there are similarities between the journeys. So, man, thank you so much for today. I enjoyed it very much. I hope we can chat more and more and more and do things together. Love you, man.
We'd love that. We've been friends a long time, and anything I can do to be helpful to what you're doing, I'd love to do it. And happy to chat with you anytime. And these conversations are always a lot of fun because I always learn a lot.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much, man. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, I really, really hope this episode was of value to you and contributed to your journey. Please consider following us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and subscribing to the podcast on all streaming services. I'm Daniel Weinmann, and this was Beyond Technical, the Nontechnical Founders Podcast.